The Painter and the Muse by Kimetsu-chan. Dazai wasn't quite sure when it started, but the sense of disarray had begun to overtake and cloud his mind. At first, he believed it was because he didn't think he deserved the job Taneda offered him. Him, working as a detective, after all the things he'd done? But as time went on, and as Dazai lived under the radar for longer and longer, he realized it was something entirely different. The feeling of something being so vastly wrong persisted, even when he grew accustomed to the idea of working in the light. It didn't strike Dazai that Oda could be the center of this wrongness, that he could be the cause of Dazai's distress. It didn't hit him until it did, like a brick. He had been lying on his motel bed with his head hanging off the side, staring at Oda's coat that was hanging off the back of a chair when it did. What did Oda even look like? The revelation that he couldn't even recall the face of his best friend, the man he was doing this all for, made him startle, and badly at that. He felt the hair on his arms begin to rise as he stared blankly at the coat. He didn't feel like he could move, he couldn't think, which scared him. He relied so heavily on his brain that the moment he couldn't properly use it anymore, he quickly spiraled into panic. And boy, was this one of the worst panic attacks he's had in a while. What? How could he forget what Oda looked like? How could he let that happen? Dazai hastily sprung from his position and desperately reached for Oda's coat. He felt like he had just committed the worst crime in existence, and maybe it was to Dazai. In his panicked daze, he wanted nothing more than to see Oda again, not only because he missed him so terribly, but to reassure himself that he could remember his face. The distraught boy draped the beige coat over his shoulders and hugged it so very tightly to his body as he moved to ball himself up in the nearest corner. He bounced his leg rapidly, but the stimulation did nothing to calm his increasingly disturbed mind. Oh God, oh why? He didn't even have the pictures they took in the bar the last time he, Oda, and Ango were together as friends. Why didn't he push to keep at least one? Dazai stared blankly and silently at the floor, trying to process what exactly he could remember. Oh, he hated this so much. He didn't want to forget him. Not for the first time. He wanted Oda back. He wanted him to tell Dazai it was okay, and that he wouldn't be mad if he couldn't remember him. But no, Oda was dead, and Dazai would never get his reassurances again. Dazai wanted to snap out of it. The logical part of his brain was screaming at him to get a grip already, but the emotional part, which he'd worked so hard to tame, just ran rampant. Dazai couldn't explain how much this hurt him. It destroyed him, like he was being eaten alive from the inside out. He felt like this was the worst punishment he could have been given for all his wrongdoings, and maybe he deserved it. But wasn't this too cruel of a consequence, even for him? He knew that, logically, there had to be some sort of a solution. There just had to be. But finding a solution felt impossible for his overwhelmed mind. He gave the idea of trying for a fix to his problem another go once he had regained control over his panic and had calmed down. He racked his brain, frantically trying to think of anything. He couldn't do photography because, again, Oda wasn't here, and he refused to go to Ango for the pictures. He'd live for the rest of time before he asked for anything from that man. What solutions did that leave him, really? He couldn't ask if anyone knew him. Being a mafia member, Oda's identity would be unknown to almost everyone. So that left one last option. Art. Music, drawing, anything in the genre. But painting stood out the most to him because paintings were always beautiful. And if he could preserve Oda in beauty, he'd be happy. See, the problem wasn't that Dazai forgot every single aspect of Oda's appearance. It was that he couldn't piece the individual features together. He remembers the exact shade of auburn Oda's hair was. He could picture every eyelash on his eye, but together it felt like a giant mess of blurred colors and shapes. So maybe, just maybe, he could figure out how to perfectly paint his dear friend's features and figure out how to put the pieces together like a puzzle. He needed to remember again. It'd kill him if he didn't. He would do anything to remember. He spent the little money he had on canvases, paintbrushes, and paints of the highest qualities he could afford. Anything he couldn't afford, he just stole. He was going to perfect the art of painting Oda to preserve his memory. and perfect it he did. Atsushi thought it was odd. It perplexed him. Dazai didn't seem to be the type of person to enjoy painting of all hobbies. Sure, he saw many canvases with sceneries that held more than twice the effort that Dazai put into his work, but painting seemed like something so much tamer than he'd envisioned Dazai doing. Well, at least Dazai enjoyed it. Or he seemed to, at least. Atsushi had only been to Dazai's apartment a handful of times, and to say it was cluttered was an understatement. Not only was it filled with empty bottles of alcohol and canned crab, the entirety of one corner of Dazai's room was absolutely littered with paint and artistic mediums alike. Paint, brushes, pencils, charcoal, pastels, you name it. But what far outnumbered any other item in the cramped room were canvases. Filled canvases of the same person over and over again. Atsushi often wondered who that person was. What the name of the gentle-looking muse that filled every inch of Dazai's small artistic space was. Whenever he asked, Dazai would gush about the paintings, but would never once identify the strange man. Atsushi figured it to be a touchy subject, so he eventually stopped asking. It wasn't until he found Dazai at a grave, sketching out a new painting of the same figure, that he realized the connection. Maybe painting would be good for Dazai. When I finished reading this for the first time, my only thought was, ow, my heart, but in the best way possible. It's so impressive for how impactful it is with minimal words. Absolutely amazing work, Kimetsu-chan. I'm honored you chose me to podfic it. We really don't have enough fics of Dazai mourning Oda's death during his hiding, or Dazai during his hiding in general. Imagine the devastation of having to be isolated for 2 years right after your friend's death. No one to console you or tell you that it's gonna get better. Such a tragic part of his life that is often overlooked. Anyway, big thanks to Ra on Tumblr for giving me permission to use their work in the thumbnail. One of my absolute favorite artists for their soft SKK art alone. Their page is linked in the description, so definitely check them out. In the end, thank you so much for listening. Tell me your thoughts, and till next time.